on these flips, you make your money on the buy. So if you buy it at the correct price, you have some wiggle room to sell it at what you need to move on to the next one. And you're not stuck on what price you have to sell it at.
Hey everybody, welcome to Cashflow, the podcast where we talk about turning properties into profits. I'm your host, Jason Yoss. I'm here today with hard money lender, Joe Lima. Joe, how we doing?
I'm great, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So a little bit about Joe, a 15-year hard money vet. You've been in the game for a while.
Yep.
You've done underwriting of projects all over the country, okay? And I want to pick your brain because I know our audience wants to know, how do they get money on their fix, their flip, their rehab, their renovation, their construction project? You're the one to go to, unless they're Daddy Warbucks with deep pockets, right?
That's where I got all the gray hairs from doing this for that long.
The gray hair looks dapper on you, my friend.
Thank you.
Tell me, so how did you get started and how did you choose this niche?
Well, I got started in the mortgage industry, like over 20 years ago. Took an intern while at San Diego State, Go Aztecs.
Nice.
And the broker at the time needed some processors, and he had some cheap labor with us, so learned the ropes that way. I just kind of fell into it, and he started paying commission checks, and you're 20 years old, getting a comma in your check, and you're like, hey, this is great. So just took it from there and rode the conventional side for about 10 years or so, or I guess maybe 9 years, and went through the 2008 crisis and then had to kind of reinvent myself after that.
Right.
And after doing the conventional side after 2008, wanted more of a little bit something different, more of a challenge. And I was already trying to get into the investor space and brokering loans to hard money lenders at that point in time. So I thought, hey, why not do this full time, and switched my niche up at that point and started to work with investors. And the main thing that's different between working with a conventional side, Joe and Susie homebuyer versus right. The Mr. Investor that's looking to flip houses or develop a property is the emotions out of it. Joe and Susie homebuyer have that emotion about, hey, we have to buy in the school district, or we don't like the paint and or how the house looks, and the developer is just looking at the numbers and saying, does this pencil, and how can we make it work, and can you lower the interest rate a little bit so we can make a little bit more profit, whatever it is. So the emotions out of it on that side, which I loved, because it's just, hey, numbers work, great, let's make the deal happen.
The fact that when emotions out of a deal,
mm-hmm.
It does make it a little bit more cooler heads, a little bit easier to navigate and make things happen, provide solutions that aren't, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm not saying there's no emotion at all, like when we're in the deal, but
sure.
Yeah, it's a different type of sell, or a different type of way of presenting a solution to what they're looking for, versus the other side. You have to baby a little bit.
There is a little bit more hand-holding.
Hand-holding. That's what I was looking for.
That's probably for sure. You're definitely providing solutions. Talk to me a bit about your mentorship or training getting into the hard money side.
Oh, yeah.
Crossing over from the conventional side.
Well, going from the conventional, working for a mortgage banker, I went over and worked for a small family office. So at the time working there, when I started, the fund they had going maybe had 30-ish million in it, which isn't bad. But in the time I left, it was well over 130. Nice. Not saying I did it all myself, but I did have something to contribute to it. But but what it did is, being such a small office, I think there's only 4 or 5 of us at the time, is you learned a ton how to bring in a deal, obviously, all the way to funding it, and how to inspect for draws on construction and all that when we get to that point. But the biggest learning curve for me is, I've always just been used to bring in the deal and make it, work it through underwriting and make it happen no matter what. Being so small, I had to change hats from being like the loan officer, bringing in the deal to make the commission, and then having to help underwrite the deal, and then putting an underwriter hat on at the same time. So you're conflicted in that. You're like, I want
commission,
this. Yeah,
my money. Is this going to be a good deal to have on the books?
Yeah. So, and you have to step back and think, okay, is this really a good deal? Is this going to be okay to put in the fund? And and we'll analyze it, make sure the guy has experience, look at his past projects, get down to the numbers, make sure the out price is going to be there, look at his skin in the game, all the things that you would normally do. But then I'm the one checking it to make sure it's working, and someone else isn't saying, no, we can't do the deal. It's me telling myself I can't do my own deal.
Right.
So one of the sayings we would have if we said something on the borderline is, would you put your grandma's money on this loan?
Grandma's money.
And I still use that to this day. Like before, I'll start analyzing the deal, and before I, hit submit for it to go to underwriting, going, okay, would our office put their own grandma's money on this loan? Right. Because you want to make sure you're safe at some point. Hard money lending, stereotypically it's just like, oh yeah, they charge high interest rates, so they're just going to do whatever, and that's not the case. You want to make sure that the leverage and everything is safe for your fund or your investors or whoever's out there putting money in for you.
What a philosophy and what a responsibility that you are working to get paid, but at the same time, having to have the oversight to make sure that the deal is going to be successful for the fund. And you have to be able to say, no, this isn't the right deal for us.
Correct.
And that philosophy of, would I put grandma's money in there? That's huge. At the end of the day, I think you had told me this before, look, you want winners for both the borrower and, the fund. So that's huge.
100%. And ultimately, I want the borrower investor to be successful because you do so much to bring in a client and have them trust you with their project and financing it, right? So you bring that person in, and you don't want to just fund a deal that's total shit. You want them, right. you want it to work and them to make a profit, because the reality is if they develop a property, a spec house, and sell it, or do a fix and flip, and they make their 50, 60 grand or whatever it is, they're going to take that money and go turn around and do another project, right? And then another project means another loan. So you want everything to work out to the best ability that you can to make sure that they're happy, you're happy, fund's happy, everyone's a winner.
That's a win-win.
Yep.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty, Joe, because I really want our audience to understand, like, hey, for a certain type of project, this is how it works when getting a hard money loan. So, can we start with what's super hot right now? The BRRR or the buy.
Yeah.
So for BRRR, like buy, renovate or rehab, rent it out, refinance it, and then repeat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk to me about how you've been doing those.
Those have, as of late, have been a little bit more difficult, or they don't get the same goal end result as they did, let's say, a year ago or 18 months ago.
Sure.
During 2022, let's call it, interest rates were lower than what they were today. The market was still, it's not that it's not hot now, but it was moving differently than it is today, right? But to summarize how that works is, you're going to buy a distressed property, add in value to it through the rehab to help gain value to the property price, and then at that point you would go to your lender and say, hey, look, I bought this property at $400,000. It's now worth $600,000. Let me cash out based off that new value.
Right.
So it's simple enough, right? But when you get to that new value, well, you'll get an appraisal, fine. But then most of these are going to be long-term holds. And how these investor clients work is they'll do what's called the DSCR product, which is hot right now. Everyone's out there selling it because they have investors out there needing to cash flow on their properties and do this cash out. So the gist of it is, if the property cash flows, like the show, if the property cash flows compared to the PITI, the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance on a monthly basis, then the loan is good. So if they're looking for that $600,000 value and they want to go to, say, 80% of that, so they're at $480,000 loan amount, we would have to look at that $480,000 loan amount and say, okay, does this amount at today's interest rates at 7.5%, 8.5%, whatever they're at right now,
yikes.
Does that still cash flow? Rents have not skyrocketed over the past year and a half. They've pretty much stayed the same.
They've been pretty steady. Or if you're in San Diego, a lot of them are capped at 10%.
Whatever. They're not going to. You can't just adjust the rents to make it work. And there's times where I get a call in a scenario and they're like, hey, they're going to DSCR this property and they want to cash out. And I'm like, to do what they're asking, they need to have this property rent for $13,000 a month. It's just not happening.
They haven't hit that.
It's not.
PITI is 12. If they're not renting for 13, I can't do the DSCR.
Do it. So. But so today compared to last year, when interest rates were on a DSCR were in the 4% range, obviously they can cash flow at a higher loan amount.
Correct.
So those still work, but they may not be getting as much cash as they would like, or compared to what they would last year.
Sure enough. Even though the value might be there, the rents aren't covering the PITI at that certain value, so they're not able to get as much cash.
The value might be there, but the rents
loan.
aren't.
Got it.
And I've had clients that have followed that to the T, and it's worked out beautiful for them. And there's one where like, this is in LA. I think of them because they just started out. They're kind of new to getting into flipping, and they flipped one house, and then they with the proceeds they bought another house and they added an ADU. Then they rented it, and they called me up. They're like, hey Joe, we're gonna actually think about keeping this as a rental. What can we do for cash out? And we cashed them out every dollar of their down payment. So that it's like they had that house for free. Right. And then they took that cash and they went and did it, parlayed it to another one.
Perfect.
They ended up with 5 houses.
Huge.
Within like a 3-block radius.
And the rents were covering the mortgage.
Mortgage, monthly property taxes, monthly insurance.
I love it.
So they're at the end of the day, they're getting everything paid for and still get money in their pocket. And it's like they didn't put a dollar out of their own pocket into these houses because they recouped their down payment each way along the way.
Right. And you can still do this today if you find the right property, right? Let's say distressed, or you can add units.
Adding units
rehab
is the
or
play
adding
right
units.
now, yes.
Boom. So if you can do that, then you're going to get a higher rental rate, as well as the value of the property is going to go up. And that's what you're going to use when they come to you to say, okay, I want to pull money out. Okay, yep, that rental rate beats the PITI. Boom, I can give you money.
Correct.
Awesome. And it's just been a little bit more difficult because interest rates are higher.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you can't get any cash out where rates are right now, at the 8% level, let's call it. But I wouldn't expect or anticipate getting the whole thing back.
And people
having that LA client example where they have 5 houses
in a row,
for free. Like that doesn't happen.
2020 to 2022 was kind of special. Yeah,
it's an outlier in the market. Maybe.
You know what though? It's funny that you bring this up because the other side of this is people say to me, Joe, okay, why don't I just go to Chase Bank and get the same thing to happen? Why can't they go do
Chase Bank can't do that. So if you're going into a conventional bank, one, they're going to pull out like tax returns, company financials, your profit and loss,
firstborn child.
Yeah, firstborn child, all that stuff. And they're going to see, okay, what can you guys afford? If people walking into a Chase Bank for a fix and flip loan, they're going to go do a full blown construction loan for you, and it's not going to happen, right? Now I do have clients that I worked with for over a decade that they've graduated from using hard money on every single deal, and they do have like lines of credit out at a big construction bank, and they will use them, but then they still will get tapped out and say, hey, Mr. Builder, you're tapped out at $5 million, and Mr. Builder wants to go buy his 6th project and needs more money, then he'll come to me for that. And those are guys I've worked with forever. So there is an instance where you graduate and get to those bigger plays, and you need a bank to help out with that kind of stuff. But for me, for hard money, compared to going to a bank, it's just an overall easier process, and it's project centric or property centric versus borrower centric.
That's a great way to put it. A hard money loan is very property or project centric versus borrower centric, with the caveat of and this is something I learned, you better bring your money to the table, and experience is king, right?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to have the perfect credit, but if you have money to put down, to put skin in the game, and you have experience in doing that project, you're more likely to lend than if I just show up like, hey, I got a 700 credit, give me money.
Yeah, experience is the best educator. So even if you're fresh off the couch, or you just took some real estate course and you want to get into listen to this podcast, and you're like, hey, I want to go start flipping houses, the best way to do it would be to team up with somebody that has the experience, and maybe you don't make any money on the deal, but you're learning.
Yeah, your split is less.
Your split is less. You take a small chunk of change. You found this deal. You go team up with the big flipper, and you learn how the process works. Then you have that underneath your belt. For someone coming to me that has they're a true rookie, or maybe one or two, compared to someone that's done 10 or 50 or 100, the person with the most experience is going to get better, higher leverage, better rates, better terms, because they're seen as less of a risk.
Right.
Versus someone that just started, they really haven't gone through the process. They don't know what's happening, because it comes down to the success of the project, and we want to see that happen. We still help out rookies, but at the same time, they're more of a risk. They're gonna have to pay the price for it.
Absolutely. Let's talk about then, because let's talk about a garden variety flip or adding an ADU. This is something we see quite a bit. I think somebody had told me like you can throw a stone and hit a property that can add an ADU in San Diego. So let's talk about how, when people approach you, how do you tend to handle that type of deal?
So like on a ADU scenario, for example.
Sure.
Yeah. So they'll they'll come to me usually from a referral. Usually it's from a real estate agent, or I work with mortgage brokers, nationwide. So it might be a mortgage broker that we're talking to. But
they're like, hey, I can't do this deal, Joe. I'm more conventional, but I know you can.
Yeah, correct. And they'll come to me and they'll hey, I got this great project in New Jersey, and this guy and this guy's looking to add 2 ADUs to it. What can we do? So my first question off the bat is, what's their experience? Do they have similar type projects, right? So they'll go through that, and they'll find out what the experience is from that borrower. They have similar type projects. It makes it all the easier. If it's their first deal, I might suggest, hey, maybe not adding that ADU and try and find something that's more just a cosmetic rehab to make it easier for you to make your money and make the deal happen. So we're looking at experience, number one, and then number two, the biggest barrier to entry is skin in the game. So hard money lenders, they're going to give you a certain amount of leverage based off experience, but the borrower is going to have to come in with the rest of that money. Right. So if it's someone that's more experienced, maybe they're coming in with only 10% down on the purchase. Wow. Someone with less experience is going to be looking like 20, 25, sometimes 30%, depending on the overall complexity of the project, right? The more money in, the more comfortable the hard money lender is. We're going to be in first lien position as collateral for the project, right? So if someone's coming in with, say, 25% down, that money can come from their own pocket, which is ideal. But most of them that are just starting out don't have that. So they'll go and raise it. And they'll have investors that are out there, or they'll JV partner with somebody, or they do what's called a gap lender, which are very hard to find nowadays. But no matter how that money is coming in, we have to source it and make sure that the parties are legit. Maybe have them a part of their LLC, which is going to be used as the borrower for the loan. Mm-hmm. But as long as they're coming in with that skin in the game, then we have something to work with there.
Got it.
We find a solution one way or the other.
When you're saying skin in the game, this is a big part of, just because the down payment you're requiring is 20%, you want that primary borrower to actually have some of the money out of their own pocket?
Ideally, yes.
Okay.
There are times if they're newer to the game and they're doing this with OPM, other people's money, 100%, 100%.
Bank of P, bank of parents.
None of their money is going into it. It's a little more leery that the deal is going to happen. Someone that's done 50 of these that has this investor group, it's usually going to be okay. But we'll focus on someone that's new and trying to just start out or relatively new, that's just starting out trying to build up that fund. If they have investor groups coming in, you can have them be a part of the project, LLC wise. Right. You can have a JV, a joint venture agreement drawn up to show okay, when the house sells, Jim and Johnny that put in 20% of the down payment get X amount back on the profit. Right. As long as there's something in writing there that we can show who's a part of it. Ultimately, we want everybody to not have lawsuits and stuff at the end, so they can't close the deal out, which I've seen happen before because they don't do anything.
That makes a huge amount of sense. When they get past that pass-go criteria level for you, is this something that it takes 30 days, 45 days for you to fund, or how does it work, and what do you expect these projects to last for? Yeah, so good question. So a new borrower, we're going to get some documentation like the LLC I was talking about. Right. We still look at credit to make sure that the borrower or the person behind the LLC is still on the up and up, right? Legitimate. Research their past projects. So a new borrower may take around 3 weeks to close, between 2 and 3 weeks to close. Mm-hmm. Someone that's a repeat, which I have a ton of those over the years, they're much faster because we've already vetted who the person is and who their entity is and their past projects, so they can close in a week sometimes. It depends on which side you're on. But once they say, we do the preliminary look through and go, okay, yeah, you're good on this project based off the numbers you gave me, then we're going into analyzing the project itself and looking through the construction budget or the rehab budget, any plans, permits, if they're doing an extensive complex rehab, looking through an appraisal report to see if the value that they're purchasing now is there versus what the future value, that ARV after rehab value is there. ARV after rehab value.
So
absolutely.
It goes down again, like I said earlier, we want the project to be successful. So kind of like a referee in that, or a teacher, checking the homework from the borrower, because the borrower's out there driving the neighborhoods, out there bird dogging to find the project, right? Then they come to me and go, hey, look, I found one here. We're going to buy this at this price, put this much money into it, and we're going to sell it at that. Then I go through and check their homework and make sure it's all there.
What's the number one thing? What is the number one thing you're like, hey, especially for new people, you missed this or you got to go get this?
Oh, budget. The budget is such
surprising, but it makes sense.
Yes, you would think like it would just come naturally, but it comes back to like forming a team. But before you go out there, and you don't want to have like analysis by paralysis, and you're too scared to make that jump and do anything. But you want to have your core group of team together, being like your real estate agent to go find the property, right. Your contractor to make sure like you're getting a correct bid and like the work you're thinking you're going to be doing on the property is going to actually fit what the contractor can do or thinks should happen. And then your lender for me. So you need someone out there, right? So
that's your team when you're out searching for your flip. If you're missing one of those, you might find a great deal. And then, I don't have a contractor. So when they come to you, I can't get it done.
Unfortunately, it happens more often than not where you get someone that doesn't, they're in either like investing out of state, like they live in California, but they're investing in Oregon and they don't have a contractor picked out yet.
They just have some pro forma this is how much it'll cost.
Yeah, this is how much. Okay, it sounds good. But then they're, I'm in contract. I'm like, okay, great. Let's get the ball rolling. Send me your rehab budget, and here's the form to fill out and sign this. Oh, I don't have the rehab budget yet. My contractor is not going to be able to look at it for a week, or I haven't picked a contractor out yet. And for me, that's like, it's a hard stop. I can't do anything because one, I don't know the dollar amount. You give me like an idea, but and then two, I don't know the full scope of work. Are you adding square footage? Are you just doing like lipstick on a pig and just making it look pretty? Like, what are you doing to this thing? So I can't figure out like the whole analyze the whole project. And then just logistically, I can't order an appraisal because the appraiser doesn't have a budget or a scope of work to know what the ARV is going to end up being. So having that contractor up front and a budget as soon as possible, even the experienced guys, the guys that have done like 40, 50 projects, they'll more than likely have a budget drawn out in their mind or like on their pro forma, like a true line item budget. It might not be perfect, but they have it together before they even put the offer in to make sure that their offer price is going to match up to the work that they have to do.
Want to get done.
Yeah, correct.
So they get it overdue. They finally get everything. It takes 2 to 3 weeks depending on who it is to close. What kind of terms are they getting now from you as the lender on this project?
Okay, so not to repeat myself, but it does come down to experience and credit. So it's right now, today's market, we talked about the less experience, maybe putting 25% down.
Okay.
So on a less experienced borrower, they're getting, say, 75 to 80% of the purchase price plus 100% of the rehab budget.
Boom.
Okay. So that total loan amount of the purchase money plus the rehab money cannot exceed 70% of that ARV. Okay.
Got it.
There are now the more experienced people can get upwards of 85 of purchase, 90 purchase in some cases, plus 100% of the rehab budget.
Got it.
As long as that doesn't go over 75% of the ARV.
Got it.
Now the ARV is crucial because that's the profit that the borrower's making. So you can you raise your investors and get your money in, and have your parents put chip in, and have all, the neighbors, whatever, and then the ARV doesn't pencil, then the project's no good.
Right.
And you don't want to press like an ARV because you want to be as conservative
as possible.
Yeah, as you can, because that's where you're at. And if you're getting, let's just say you want to go up to, you need to go up to 80% of the ARV. So now you're getting a loan for 80% of the future value. That leaves 20% for you to gain a profit, right? Then you subtract your realtor fees.
Right.
Don't forget you're paying, interest on this every month, so you have holding costs.
Right.
There's going to be some small cost overruns. You got to stage the place, all that stuff. So that 20% will shrink down very quickly. So if it's 5% in realtor fees, let's say off the top right there, so that's 15% left, and then all the other garbage I just mentioned. So you're going to do all that for maybe making 5 or 6%.
Wow.
You don't want to do that. So that's why you gauge it between the 70 and 75, because then it's realistic that you can still make some real dough at the end of the day.
Absolutely. That's such great advice, and breaking it down on how an actual loan plus the rehab cost goes into the way you do your hard money. Just in general, what's the biggest thing that causes failure?
After going through all that, they still have to go in and put the shovel to the ground and make the project happen, right?
And you're right. Other than the market crashing, like where do these people fail?
The most common one, and it goes back to forming a team, and not to blame it all on the contractors, because I know there's contractors out there that I work with, but is not having a trusted contractor.
Right.
And I've seen issues happen where they just don't show up, or they bid a project way too low just to get the business, and then they go in and it's like doubled when they get in there, and there's too much costs that need to happen. So other than the market crash, I've seen contractors fail. I've seen unforeseen circumstances happen on the property, like you see on one of those HGTV shows where they open up the wall and there's a bunch of mold or something. That screws it up. But if you have enough money in your pocket, you can go and fix it and still make some dough.
Right.
Projects take too long, which is contractor again.
Every day you're holding that project is $1.
Is $1. I've also seen lately where investors get stuck on what they thought the price is supposed to be. And
like ARV, like what they should be selling it for.
Like they bought a project a year ago or 18 months ago. Let's say it's a bigger, more complex, and they're just finishing it up now.
I totally understand that people are gonna get involved, and these projects take a while, and they think like, hey, I thought I was gonna get $2 million on the project I bought for 1.5, and all of a sudden, like, wake up. The market hasn't crashed or anything, but wake up and it's really not.
They might need to sell it for $1,750 instead of $2 million, and they're still holding out for that $2 million bucks. And I'm going, hey, well, you're paying $20,000 a month in this thing, so those months are going to add up pretty quick. So you might as well just make your money now and move on to the next one. Let's move. Because again, it goes down to I want to do another loan. Right. They want to do another project. So being realistic with what your sell price is, and it goes back to the old cliche, and I'm not the first one to say this, is on these flips, you make your money on the buy. So if you buy it at the correct price, you have some wiggle room to sell it at what you need to move on to the next one. And you're not stuck on what price you have to sell it at. And you don't want to be the person that's selling for the record price per square foot on the block.
Right.
You want to be realistic of where you can fall on that.
That makes the most sense. And I keep hearing that, and it sounds like the most sage advice. If you don't buy for the right price, you can't expect you're going to cut costs on construction to save you. In fact, it's usually the opposite. Mm-hmm. That's where you lose. And you talked to me a little bit about this. Over the last couple of years, appreciation has been saving people's asses. The fact that we're just skyrocketing on appreciation, people have been getting away from it. I want you to take me through, Joe, some lasting advice that you would give to these flippers or construction or people getting in the market and needing hard money. Give me some advice for that young real estate investor. But the real estate investor, that young, they're just getting in the market. What are you giving them advice-wise?
Advice-wise, I'm not to repeat myself, but forming that team is number one. And don't take a project just because you have a deal.
Right.
It might not make sense. And you're not going to go in and do a fix and flip project just to do a project and say you did one. You want to make money on it at the end of the day, right? That's why we do this for the most part, right? So you want to have cash flow. You want to make the profit at the end of the day on the flip. So you not to get stuck on analysis by paralysis,
right?
Which I've said earlier, but you also want to make sure that you're getting into something that's conservatively will work out.
Yeah.
So that's my number one piece of advice.
I think that's a huge takeaway. The more people educate themselves, they don't have all that fear, like, it's okay to fail, and they go ahead and pull the trigger on something that makes sense. I think they are going to be successful.
But 100%. And just on that topic too, I'm just thinking of like instances where I get called up because a realtor referred an investor, and they're talking to me about their second or first flip or third flip or whatever, and I'm going through it going, I don't agree with you on the comps, and I may say no, I don't think this is a good one before we even get started, and they might get offended or what are you talking about, and I'm like, I just be careful. There's going to be a lender that's going to come in and just jump on it and just to do the deal and not really care, and I'm not like that. I want everybody to come through the transaction and be happy about it and had a good experience, not only with funding the loan, but like we talked about earlier, they make money at the end of the day.
Right. Grandma's money.
Yeah, okay, grandma's money. Grandma's money needs to be okay.
Joe, I really appreciate you. I mean, you took us through two fabulous examples of how hard money works, especially for the young investor or your everyday investor, that's some of the nuts and bolts that a lot of us don't know. We hear the terms ARV, BRRR, but we don't know the processes. So I really appreciate you coming in and going through that.
Yeah, that went fast.
Well, I mean, after 30 minutes and you know, having a cough and all that stuff. No, but I really appreciate you coming on.
Of course.
Educating our people so that they know what to do when they need hard money. Any final thoughts before I wrap it up?
No.
Well,
good. I think I exerted everything I could right now.
Well, hey, thank you, Joe, for being here. Everybody else, thanks for tuning into Cashflow, where, again, we talk about turning properties into profits. Stay tuned. We'll see you next week.